The Firm, India's only show on corporate law, tax and audit matters.
I never thought I'd say this, but there's good news for Indian taxpayers. Actually, it may even be landmark news. A couple of announcements by the CBDT indicate a new approach to tax litigation. Couple that with the speedier disposal of tax cases, and what do you know? Achche Din may finally be here for tax litigation. On the show today, I have with me two veteran tax lawyers to tell me if Achche Din are finally here. Dinesh, Vyas and Arvind, Datar. And gentlemen, to both of you, a very warm welcome. There are two specific CBDT decisions from barely 3 days ago that I want to discuss with you. Starting first with the one that I consider landmark. The tax department has often been criticized by high courts for filing frivolous appeals. A Bombay High Court judgment noted that in the first 5 months of 2014, of the 4,784 appeals filed from tribunal orders, 3,968 were filed by revenue and only 816 by assessees. Last year, a CBDT order directed collegiums of chief commissioners of income tax to approve the filing of appeals before high courts. But the problem persists and the criticism unabated. So now the CBDT has decided to extend the collegium system to consider withdrawal of appeals that are no longer prosecutable. Have you ever heard of the tax department taking a position that we will consider withdrawing frivolous appeals?
No, never. Never in the past had things such as this had happened. And at this stage, let me draw your attention to the decision of the Bombay High Court in the case of Tata Petrodyne. Judgment delivered by Justice Dharmadhikari and Justice Syed in the month of October or November 1914. It was there that the Bombay High Court had delivered a very stern warning to the department and told them not to file frivolous litigation. And they also warned that if the trend of filing frivolous litigation continues, the court will be compelled to levy heavy costs on the department, and in some cases the costs may be recovered also from the officers. And it is because of that the heat seems to have been generated. So it is from that point of view that the department has obviously started taking the things very, very seriously. And we are happy. There is a change in the mindset, and we hope that this continues, Menaka.
Well, Mr. Vyas, the Bombay High Court may have sparked this fire, if I may say so. It's also added fuel to it, because I'm going to refer to another decision in the Credit Agricole case, where a bench of Justice Sanklecha and Justice Jamdar, called the appeal by the tax department frivolous, saying either there is no application of mind to the order of the tribunal, which is the ITAT, before filing of this appeal, or the revenue is deliberately seeking to keep the pot boiling so that uncertainty is kept alive. It shows the casual attitude of the revenue in filing appeals. This is not the first of its kind. We had earlier also passed orders disapproving this conduct of the revenue, but there is no improvement. In that very same decision, the Bombay High Court has suggested that this kind of collegium system be set up, an in-house committee of senior officers to review decisions taken in the aspect or respect of appeals already filed and pending. And it seems that the CBDT has followed up on both these directions of the Bombay High Court, the one that you outlined and the one that I've added to this discussion. How much faith do you have, Mr. Datar, that the tax department will in fact use these collegiums not only to review the appeals that are taking place from the tribunal to the High Court levels, but now also consider withdrawing some of those frivolous appeals, because this is probably the first time the department will consider doing this?
Yes, as Mr. Vyas pointed out, this is indeed a completely new landmark event, and I think there is no better way to start 2016 than by having the collegium decide and withdraw the appeals which are not worth pursuing. But I was just hearing what you were saying and Mr. Vyas was mentioning. Well, it's very easy to criticize the department for filing appeals, but one must also realize that sometimes it's a question of playing safe. If they don't file an appeal, they are found fault with. If they file an appeal, they are found fault with. And you have the audit making all sorts of comments saying that you did not file the appeal and there was a loss of revenue. So it was basically an attitude of playing safe, that why should I take a chance, and I'll simply file the appeal and let the High Court or the Superior Tribunal or the High Court decide. That's the point. But now with the collegium, you will not be able to victimize a particular officer for not filing the appeal. There's a collegium of two very senior officers, and I'm certain that they'll take a decision and withdraw the appeal, especially where the cases are already covered by the Supreme Court. Cases are no longer relevant. They might as well withdraw the appeal. And I think they've also given clear guidelines as to when they will withdraw and when they will not withdraw. And if they follow the guidelines, it'll be a very, very welcome step in reducing the arrears in courts. Particularly, one more fact you must know, that because of the NJC judgment and so on, there are almost, the vacancies are now 40% in high courts. In many high courts, the vacancies have touched 40% of the total strength. So you also have a shortage of judges. So this kind of a move will be most welcome. It will reduce the pressure on the courts.
Yeah, well, they have put down some guidelines for the withdrawal of such appeals, and in very briefly, the department is saying that this will be considered in cases involving the tax effect above the revised monetary limit, if no question of law is involved, or if the issue is considered settled by the department, or the appeal is no longer relevant in view of subsequent amendment. Mr. Datar, do you think these are too many caveats, and that in effect very few cases will actually be considered for withdrawal of appeal, or these are fair grounds?
No, I think these are fair grounds, because suppose if it's an important question of law, even though the amount is less, they will not withdraw it. And they have mentioned cases where there are multiple batches, where it involves the constitutional validity of a provision. So I think all in all, I would say I've gone through the guidelines. I think they have been well drafted.
Mr. Vyas, do you have any doubts about the feasibility of this? Maybe this looks good on paper, but is unimplementable in real life, this ability to withdraw, consider withdrawing cases?
No, I think it is attractive and possible for a serious implementation in practice also. The reason is this, that it is the climate which has changed totally, number one. So far, the decisions for either filing or for withdrawal was being taken by one single commissioner sitting alone in his office. Whereas now, it's going to be a collegium consisting of normally probably 3 commissioners.
Here it says 2.
They will very openly, so even if it is 2, there will be objectivity, there will be truthfulness, and the fear that, it is me and me alone who is taking a decision. Once that fear is not there, once it is a joint decision, the adherence to the truth, adherence to the objectivity will be much greater.
Mr. Vyas, this whole approach of the Department of Revenue or the Tax Department was in fact heralded by, the decisions in the Vodafone transfer pricing case and the Shell transfer pricing case. Because in both those cases, the decision by the Bombay High Court was against revenue, and revenue at that point decided that we are not going to appeal these matters to the Supreme Court, thereby, in a sense, setting a new precedent, because it's very rare in this country that in big ticket cases where the numbers involved or the amounts involved are very large, that revenue decides not to appeal. One may argue that those cases to begin with could have been termed frivolous. Yet, I do want your comment on what you think this means. A landmark shift in the way the government and the Department of Taxes looks at tax litigation?
Yeah, certainly. It is certainly a very major departure. Here, Menaka, let me draw your attention to the fact that as far as the decision not to file an appeal in the case of Vodafone, that was taken at the cabinet level.
Yes.
It was in the cabinet, the meeting presided over by Mr. Narendra Modi and all other senior ministers, that this decision was taken. And since, it was taken at that higher level, naturally it assumed importance. Since it was taken at that high level, it is to be implemented, it is to be very seriously followed. And I will say that whatever is happening now is in a way continuation of the same spirit.
The CBDT has also raised the monetary limits or thresholds for filing appeals. Here onwards, matters in which the tax effect is lower than 10 lakh rupees will not be appealed by the department at the ITAT or tribunal level. The threshold for filing High Court appeals has been doubled to 20 lakh rupees, and for the Supreme Court stays at 25 lakhs. But what's most interesting, Mr. Vyas, is that this comes with retrospective effect. So wherever there were pending appeals where the thresholds did not match the revised thresholds, those cases can immediately be withdrawn or cancelled out?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, let me tell you, Menaka, in Ahmedabad, day before yesterday, an order is passed by the tribunal already in implementation of the CBDT circular of 10th December. In Ahmedabad, a tribunal order has been passed where 251 appeals are already disposed of on that ground, on the ground of monetary limit. And 1,500 more appeals are slated for hearing immediately, and they again are going to be disposed of because they are below the monetary limit which is laid down in the new circular. So it will naturally, this will apply retrospectively, and that will therefore go a long way to reduce the current litigation also.
Well, this discussion is full of many firsts, because after a long time I'm using the word retrospective with a positive attribute to it. I'm just, Mr. Datar, the tax department says both moves together. The collegiums that will now consider withdrawal of frivolous appeals, as well as this raising of monetary thresholds, could cut tax litigation down by 50%. Do you think that could possibly happen?
I don't have the empirical data about 50%, but I'm told that it could be anywhere between the region of 35 to 50%. And as you mentioned, that retrospective had acquired a very odious tone after the Vodafone amendments. And when you mentioned, Mr. Vyas mentioned about the decision in Vodafone, equally embarrassing was the decision in Shell. You see, the decision not to press the appeal before the Supreme Court was because the demand itself was so outrageous. I mean, you say that the premium on a share is your income under transfer pricing, and then you say the premium should have been 50,000. You demand tax on that, demand interest on that. If it had gone to the Supreme Court, it would have been laughable in world circles. You see, as it is, after the Vodafone amendments, retrospective amendments, we have been subject to a great deal of criticism in international tax circles. We have got the largest amount of tax litigation. So it had become so embarrassing to the government that the government starts appealing in every little case, that this was perhaps a step in terms of necessity. But what is heartening is that they have taken note of the criticism and acted positively and not stuck to some kind of obdurate principle that we will not change. And when you mention about retrospective, you see, unless they had made this circular retrospective, it would not have made sense, because if there are, say, a lack of appeals pending in the tribunal, and if you're going to operate it prospectively, then you're only going to cut down the appeals in future. But what about the past? So if you have to cut down the number of cases, it had to be applied even to pending cases.
That covers the two important CBDT announcements that I wanted to focus on. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll find out how and why tax litigation is moving faster through the judicial process, both at the ITAT as well as at the Supreme Court. Been other changes taking place even in the judicial process front that is helping the expediting of tax litigation, so to speak. Mr. Vyas, let me start first by you. I know in a conversation a few weeks ago you were telling me how busy you were because the ITAT strength, or the vacancies at the ITAT, had been rapidly filled over the last few months, and cases are now being heard faster than ever before.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct, because in the last 2 to 3 months, about 30 new members have been appointed, with the result that most of the benches in every station, every city, wherever the tribunal is functioning, most of the benches are now functional. And because more benches are functional, obviously the rate of disposal of the appeals is also going up. The hearings, the number of hearings which are taking place in the tribunal is going up very, very rapidly, and naturally therefore this results in a faster and larger disposal of the appeals. So 30 new members have certainly, added to the momentum, to the speed of the disposal of tax litigation in the tribunal.
Also keeping lawyers busy was the Supreme Court tax bench, which may be on a bit of a break since the early part of December. But Mr. Datar, again, in a previous conversation I've had with you, you were indicating that the constitution of that tax bench since March this year has helped move cases stuck at the Supreme Court level, which number, I think, somewhere close to more than 10,000, have helped them move much faster.
Yes. In fact, from statistics show the appeals pending were from 2002, and now in a matter of a few months they have come to 2008. They disposed of that number of appeals. And this Supreme Court bench was excellent. It had a very good grasp of the subject and very speedy disposal. Yeah,
Mr. Datar, you said that the tax bench is no longer sitting since the beginning of December?
There was this tax bench which was consisting of Justice Sikri and Justice Nariman, and which was functioning for quite some time. But after Chief Justice Dattu retired, Justice Sikri is now sitting on the first bench with Chief Justice Thakur and Justice Bhanumati. So I do not know what is the plan post-vacation. If he reconstitutes the bench, then there will be another tax bench. But right now there is no dedicated tax bench as it was earlier.
And you are hopeful that a tax bench will be reconstituted?
And only one thing I want to mention, we really hope so. And I also wanted to mention, I don't know if it's relevant now, but just as CBDT has issued this circular fixing monetary limits, I really hope the Central Board of Excise and Customs also comes with a parallel circular whereby excise and customs appeals which are either frivolous or low value, how we want to call them, they are also taken off the roster, because there's a pendency is quite large in the excise tribunal as well. So I think this move by the CBDT can and should, I think, be copied or followed in indirect taxes as well. And also perhaps at the state levels by various VAT authorities, you see.
Okay, fair enough. Which brings me to my last question, and that really leads back to my introduction, in which I said that, what do you know, finally Achche Din might be here for tax litigation. Would you say that is the case, Mr. Vyas? And what else would you recommend the government implement, the judiciary implement, so that these good efforts are doubled?
Yes, certainly Achche Din are, going to be coming. There is no doubt about it. And if you ask me very specifically, what is the suggestion? In the income tax department, the representation of the cases on behalf of the department is an area where the CBDT and the government needs to look at very, very seriously. Let us face the reality. Today, nobody wants to be a departmental representative in the tribunal. And because of that, the cooperation which the department itself should give to the tribunal is lacking. It is not in the right measure. And if therefore that area is taken up very seriously, I am sure that the engine of litigation, rendering of the justice, will move much faster.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Menaka.
Mr. Datar, Achche Din for tax litigation are here.
Yes, I wholly agree with Mr. Vyas on that. And as I said, I think there is no better way to begin the new year than this circular, at least as far as direct taxes is concerned. On the suggestions for improvement, as you asked me, I would just mention two things. One is, this is a good step forward, but it would be better if we have a situation where, just as a collegium for not filing frivolous appeals, there should be some system where there is a method of not starting the frivolous litigation, like the Shell case or the Vodafone case or various transfer pricing cases, indiscriminate reopening of assessments. If you nip it in the bud, you will have a system where you don't come to a situation where you have a bad assessment order, a bad appeal, a further bad appeal to the tribunal, and then suddenly you wake up and say, there's too much of litigation and I'm just going to chop off 40%, 30% of the cases. That if you have proper assessment orders, you'll have that many less frivolous appeals. That's one suggestion. And I don't know if Mr. Vyas will agree with me, but one of suggestions of my colleagues are telling me is that the income tax tribunal works only half a day. Will it be possible for them to work full day as the excise tribunal works or the company law board works? If not for all the 5 days, at least for 2-3 days, they can sit in a post-lunch session also and dispose of cases. I think Mr. Vyas would be the right person to comment on that. Yeah. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Yeah, Arvind, the position is this, that there is a hearing for the first half until the lunch, but then thereafter, the tribunal members do have to dictate long orders They have to read the facts. They have to read the law in great detail. And it is for that they need, more than enough time to go deeper into the matter to deliver a good judgment. So, for me personally, it appears that the system which is currently going on in the tribunal is the correct system. And let me also tell you, Arvind, that whenever suppose there are heavy complicated matters, the tribunal does continue in that particular case hearing even before beyond the lunch.
No, I have only one caveat on that, because the Supreme Court works the whole day, High Courts work the whole day. They have, after 4:30, they still have time to ponder and examine and dictate. So I'm just talking in terms of disposal of cases. I mean, excise tribunal works for the whole day. Every tribunal, like your example, works for the full day. So
I mean, it can be given a try.
I think we can try it as an experiment. No, yeah. It will be even more Achche than in 2016 then, yeah.
Okay, that's a fair enough suggestion, gentlemen. In fact, there have been some good moves these last few weeks and months, but all to cure the symptoms. What you suggested, Mr. Datar, is in fact curing the illness itself, and that is changing the attitude of assessing officers. Let's hope that too happens in 2016. Both of you have agreed there can be no better way to start a new year than on this note. I'll thank you very much for joining us on this discussion, and thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.
We'll be back with The Firm next week.
The Firm, India's only show on corporate law, tax and audit matters.